Look, I'm only against the possibility of doing your daughter more harm than good.
Nothing you could do could make it any worse.
I can't do it. I need evidence that the church would accept his signs of possession.
Like what?
Like her speaking in a language she's never known or studied.
What else?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
I thought you were supposed to be an expert.
There are no experts. You probably know as much about possession as most priests. Look, your daughter doesn't say she's a demon. She says she's the devil himself. Now, if you've seen as many psychotics as I have, you'd realize that's the same thing as saying you're Napoleon Bonaparte.
Welcome to Kermode Uncut. William Peter Blatty, the author and screenwriter of The Exorcist, died last week. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to say a few words about Blatty. As you'll know if you're a regular here, I've long considered The Exorcist to be the greatest movie ever made. And one of the reasons I love it so much is the writing, the screenplay. Like so many people, I had read the novel of The Exorcist long before I saw the film. I was quite young when the film came out. I wasn't old enough to see it. I had an X certificate here. So I read the novel and I was completely entranced by it. In fact, I then went on to read the screenplay, which Blatty published alongside his original longer screenplay. So by the time I finally saw the film, not only did I know the novel, I knew the screenplay pretty much off by heart. And as William Friedkin has always said, the absolute backbone of The Exorcist is that writing, is that screenplay, those superb storytelling strokes that William Peter Blatty conjures. But the other thing that's important is to remember that despite the fact The Exorcist is widely considered to be a horror film, there was so much more to Blatty than scares. He was one of the funniest people I ever had the privilege to meet. Over the years, I interviewed him several times for documentaries and we became friends. And he was a genuinely witty man whose writing was once described as being on a par with that of S.J. Perelman. He started out as a comedy writer. He wrote screenplays for example, Blake Edwards. He co-wrote A Shot in the Dark, the fabulous Inspector Clouseau movie.
Do not tangle with me. I'm a trained expert in karate. My hands are lethal weapons.
One of his early novels was called Twinkle Twinkle Killer Kane, and it's a strange, absurdist tale, which later was reversioned into The Ninth Configuration, which Blatty then directed for the screen from his own screenplay. And The Ninth Configuration is one of my favourite movies of all time. I just love it to pieces. It's a real cult classic. It's intelligent and theological. It's so full of the religion that obsessed Blatty so much. But it's laugh out loud funny, and it is endlessly quotable. A film which has really grown in stature over the years.
Is this your dog?
What does it look like, my zebra?
What do you call him?
Irresponsible. He's 10 minutes late for rehearsal. Out, Sir Lawrence.
Lieutenant Reno is adapting Shakespeare's plays for dogs.
He also directed The Exorcist 3, which was something of a compromised production, but recently, at the end of last year, a Blu-ray was released in America that attempted to reconstruct Blatty's original version, which is much closer to his novel, Legion. And they had worked from a screenplay that Blatty had published and that I had written an introduction to some time ago. And I think that director's cut shows you so much about Blatty's writing. It has warmth, it has heart, it has wit, it's funny, it's about the human condition. Yes, there is the supernatural in it, but actually its most wonderful moments are the touching conversations between Kinderman and Dyer.
You wouldn't want to live forever.
Yes, I would.
No, you wouldn't. You'd get bored.
I have hobbies.
One of the loveliest things about Bill was just how self-effacing he was. I have a great memory from a few years ago that I was in Washington and I'd been to see him. And we were just a couple of miles away from Georgetown. I said, look, would you indulge me? Would you come with me to the Exorcist steps and, just stand on them with me? Because I had made pilgrimages to those steps years and years ago. In fact, when I got married, I went there on my honeymoon. That's how obsessed with the Exorcist I am. And Bill said, oh, okay, fine. And he did. And we went to the Exorcist steps in Georgetown, which are so magical. And of course, when we were there was loads and loads of tourists taking photographs because those steps have become so iconic. And none of them recognized Bill Blatty. Of course, they wouldn't. And at one point, there was a couple of Japanese tourists who were trying to take photographs of themselves with the steps. And they turned round to Bill. And Bill thought they might recognize him. And they went, excuse me. And he went, yes. They went, would you mind taking our photograph? And they gave the camera unknowingly to Bill Blatty. And he put it up to take the photograph. I said, Bill, shall I tell them? He went, no. So somewhere in the world, there are a couple of tourists who travelled an awfully long way to see the Exorcist steps, and they have a photograph of themselves on the steps. What they don't know is that that photograph was taken by the author of The Exorcist. If you haven't seen the Ninth Configuration, if you haven't seen the director's version of The Exorcist 3, if you haven't read some of Blatty's writing, then do. It's wonderful. He was a real master of words. And for my money, one of the most important artists of the 20th century.